What a college basketball season it has been thus far, and we're breaking it down for NBC Sports. John Fanta and Robbie Hummel with all of you. And Robbie, a year after you get 4 number 1 seeds in the Final Four, now the debate across the country is, well, how many number 1 seed type teams are there? And the fact is, there's a bunch of candidates and there's a bunch of heavyweights across college basketball, whether it be in a stacked Big Ten, a loaded Big 12. The SEC is reloaded as well. What do you make of the state of college hoops this season?
Well, I totally agree with you, John. I think the parity at the top, just in terms of is there a dominant team, but there are a lot of really good teams. I think you have to make the case that Arizona has been dominant as they haven't lost, the perfect 19-0. But I do think that in terms of just the state of the game, the talent level, whether it's some of the influx from Europe, or just some of the still older players, even though we don't have COVID years, there's a lot of older players in college basketball. The portal keeps these high major teams just reloading at the top. But I think when you look at just how talented across the board a lot of these players and teams are, it's really impressive. I think the freshmen have been such a big story, whether it's Tabonsa out at BYU, Michael Brown when he was healthy at Louisville. You've got Darren Peterson and his whole situation. Cameron Boozer, such a big story at Duke, following in his father's footsteps. The freshmen have been phenomenal. And the talent level going into this NBA draft, it would be a good year to tank if you're an NBA team. But I think that, and seeing how many good players there are across the board, that really is a great story for college hoops.
Yeah, let's stick with that freshman class for a moment, because there's even some gems across the board. Caden Wagler and Illinois, part of an Illinois roster that's loaded with talent and different upperclassmen. And now Wagler's role very important with Kylan Boswell banged up for the Illini. How about at Houston, Robbie?
Yes.
Houston makes it to the national championship game, and people are saying, well, you lose LJ Cryer. Are you going to be able to just duplicate it? Well, it looks dang near close, and Kingston Flemings and Chris Sinak have added something. Emmanuel Sharp's been tough. JoJo Tugler's still there. Here's Kelvin Sampson showing I could do it with freshmen too. It's pretty remarkable.
And he hasn't necessarily been known to be a guy that leans all that heavily, even on some of the talented freshmen that he's had. I've been amazed in terms of just seeing the leadership that Kingston Flemings has been able to take on. Because you have a Milos Uzan, because you have an Emmanuel Sharp, you're thinking, all right, these are guys that have been through it, understand what Kelvin wants, have played in the national championship game. And, they've honestly done a good job of deferring at times, I think, to an incredibly talented freshman in Flemings. His change of direction is violent, and his burst is pretty impressive to see. He's probably a top 5-6 pick in the NBA draft here this June. But Houston has reloaded. I do think that there started to be some separation. I think Arizona unquestionably there at the top. Michigan, I know they slipped up against Wisconsin. Wisconsin had to make 15 threes in a game in Ann Arbor to end up beating those guys. Duke at 17-1, Houston at 17-1, and then Iowa State started to slip up a little bit. Purdue has started to slip up a little bit. I do think that there has been some separation at the top, and you're talking about who are the 1 seeds right now. I think it probably would be Michigan, Arizona, probably Houston, and Duke would be right there as well. So we'll see. Plenty of time still to play with the bracketology and see how this plays out. But I do think that in terms of over the last week or two, there have been some cracks for some of the teams that we thought might be at the top.
And in the midst of this, you have a Nebraska team that has not lost. And of course, we hope that Braden Frager is all right after he rolls his ankle in the Huskers' most recent win. But Gonzaga, they only have 1 loss. Yes, it came by 40 to Michigan, but it felt like that one game. Then everybody says, well, maybe they aren't as for real. Well, they only have 1 blemish. And then the one other team that we did not mention is the Connecticut Huskies, who have won 2 national championships up until last year consecutively. And with Braylon Mullins, another dynamic freshman, Alex Caravan solo ball, Harris Reed on the interior, and Silas Demery from Georgia. Dan Hurley says, well, look, I've won 14 consecutive games. Well, why not us?
Yeah, and rightfully so. And I think with UConn, the difference this year is they can guard you. Last year they had to outscore you. And I give a lot of credit to Silas Demery for kind of being a guy, and I think Dan Hurley has given a lot of credit to him too, to change the defense at the point of attack, just to kind of set the tone and be that guy that that is every possession going to be out there and getting into other point guards. So Nebraska is a phenomenal story. Just to see the way that Fred Hoiberg has coached this team, they're so efficient. They don't make mistakes. Defensively, they have an identity. There was a bit of a tragedy last year for them in the sense that if Rink Mast plays, they're an NCAA tournament team. If you've got Bryce Williams and Rink Mast, they play in the NCAA tournament. But give them credit, taking on his meniscus injury last year, and you go to the Crown, people would say, who cares? It's the Crown. The NCAA tournament's where you want to play. But they use the Crown as a real springboard. And, Sam Hoiberg is one of the great stories. Just the ultimate glue guy. Guard you, rebounds, can score when needed. He just wins. He makes winning plays. He's a hustle player. He was a good story, I think, 2 years ago. But he's helped change the culture of this team. And I know the good story about it is that his mom was kind of getting on dad to play him more. Look at how that's played out. So Nebraska is phenomenal, undefeated, incredible. And the people they've beaten too. Win in Illinois, beat Michigan State at home. They've got a big one with Michigan here looming in the next week. But Fred Hoiberg deserves a lot of credit. He's definitely up there for Coach of the Year nationally.
Yeah, I'll give a couple surprises. Virginia, I thought they'd be good. Ryan Odom's proven to be a heck of a hire. Teesta Ritter has had a heck of a year. Yet another freshman who has really impressed. Malik Thomas, Chance Mallory. That team is legit. How about Miami of Ohio? You got to bring them up because they've had an unbelievable start to this season. Travis Steele, for the Redhawks to be sitting in a position where you start the season at 17-0 against Division I opponents, 20-0 overall. That's a remarkable story. But I think that's also, Robbie, it's good for college basketball to see in Nebraska. And to even see Arizona was thought to be maybe a top 20 team, top 15 team. To see them at number one, it also shows you, we don't know exactly, especially nowadays, what's going to happen when you turn the page to November.
Well, and I love talking about Miami, Ohio, just because of the fact that we've destroyed mid-majors' ability to retain players. But they retain 70% of their roster. That's like top 50 in college basketball. And you can see that when you have continuity and guys back that are bought into the program, some good things can happen. But for them to be undefeated, they've won some crazy games. The Kent State game, no idea how they won it. The Buffalo game, no idea how they won it. But they have found ways to get it done. And, for a program that has had some blips of success, the Wally Zerbiak team, some success back, now almost 30 or 40 years ago. Travis Steele deserves a lot of credit for what he's been able to accomplish there in Oxford. That's a heck of a story right now.
Tuesday night on NBCSN and Peacock, it is a massive Big Ten doubleheader with one of the biggest games of the season to date. The Nebraska Cornhuskers, as amazing a story in the country, paying a visit to Ann Arbor to take on the Michigan Wolverines, who are in that number one slot in all of the analytics, not in the AP poll, but in all of those analytics. That's followed by a game that Robbie Hummel knows a thing or two about. Indiana welcoming their national championship football team inside Assembly Hall for their first home game since Kurt Signetti and Fernando Mendoza won the title. They welcome in Matt Painter and the Purdue Boilermakers. Robbie, let's start with that Huskers-Wolverine showdown and then get into the rivalry. What stands out to you about this heavyweight night of hoops?
Well, I think the Michigan loss to Wisconsin looms large, in a way where, much like the Badgers, Nebraska is going to shoot over half their shots from three. And at the same time, they've got to stretch big in Rink Mast. And Adai Mara had a hard time dealing with Alexa Bieliauskas. Bieliauskas makes 5 threes in that game 2 weeks ago. So that's certainly something to watch for. Can Nebraska handle the size and the physicality of what Michigan's front court of Yaxel Lendeborg, Merez Johnson, and Daimar is? Because honestly, and it's not like that's a Nebraska problem, that's a lot of people problem. Michigan is enormous with their 3 big lineup. So I'm really intrigued to see if Michigan guards better. Dusty May has talked about some of the communication issues they've had. That's got to be solved against the Nebraska offense that sprays it from 3 and runs really good stuff. Fred Hoiberg, a great offensive coach. It should be a great matchup. 1-loss Michigan, undefeated Nebraska. Nebraska, what, the longest winning streak in the country, going back to the Crown?
Yeah.
That's an incredible story. That's going to be a really fun game. Really, really fun game. Really big game in the Big Ten there. I'm looking forward to seeing how they guard.
Boilers, Hoosiers. How does Indiana hang in with Purdue?
Make a lot of threes. They're another team. They are getting them up from three, but their best players have to get going. Tucker DeVries kind of did that in their last game in the second half, saw the ball going. He's had a tough shooting Big Ten season here. And then I think Lamar Wilkerson needs to get more attempts. They've got to do a better job of generating offense where they get their best players better looks, where it's not just go make a play. The health of Tate and Conaway is big, and they've got a game against Rutgers before that matchup with Purdue. But I just think if they're not making threes and their best two aren't going, it's going to be a problem. And then on top of that, we kind of discussed this, John, in the game at Michigan on Tuesday. They're going to have a heck of a time dealing with Purdue size, just like they did having a hard time dealing with Michigan size and Michigan State size. Indiana's been prone to turn the ball over in stretches. That can't happen. They can't have those big lulls that they've had against the better people on their schedule. But Purdue has got to look to just throw the ball inside. That's got to be their thing. And Purdue with a tough game before they go to Bloomington. They've got Illinois coming in. What a monster game Saturday. So I think Purdue looks to impose their physicality on the interior, and Indiana's going to look to get it going from three. Should be a really fun matchup to watch.
Darren DeVries, first edition of Indiana and Purdue. And for Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Run, they don't want one last trip to Assembly Hall to be their demise. They want to go out there with a road win. We can't wait for it. Tuesday night on Peacock, Michigan, Nebraska, Indiana, Purdue. So we've hit on the state and the sports, top dogs, a deep, deep freshman class, your biggest surprises, and we're just getting started here on this road to March in college basketball.